Hello and welcome again, everybody, to the Olmsted Lunch and Learn all about boards and commissions. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Leah. I've been contracted to help facilitate today's discussion. I'm a middle-aged white woman with short brown hair and glasses sitting in a home office today, and I'm very excited to get started with today's Lunch and Learns. So today's discussion is about boards and commissions. Boards, commissions, task forces, councils, and work groups in the state actually exist to advise policymakers on various issues. There are 255 state boards and commissions in Minnesota alone. 87 boards and commissions have members that self-identified as having a disability, which is about 1/3 of those boards and commissions. There are right now more than 1,100 open seats across 188 boards and commissions as of recent April 2023. So about 6% of seats on the boards are held by people with disabilities, whereas 12% of Minnesotans are actually listed as disabled. So this chart here shows the percentage of Minnesota adults who have a disability compared to the number of seats on those boards and commissions held by people who have self-identified as having a disability. The numbers break down to, out of 3,933 filled seats, 231 are held by Minnesotans who identify as being disabled. So we're happy that people are here today to learn more about participating on boards and commissions. So we have some speakers here today who are going to talk to you shortly. We have Jack Congello, who is the Director of Boards and Commissions from the Office of the Governor. Becky Thomas, who's the Board Chair for the Minnesota Commission of the Deaf, Deafblind, and Hard of Hearing. And Michele Isham, who's the Vice Chair and East Central Representative of the Minnesota Commission of the Deaf, Deafblind, and Hard of Hearing. Very excited to have these speakers with us today. Welcome to you all. Thank you very much for being here. And I'm going to hand over to Jack.
Well, thank you so much, Leah, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing me to join you in today's meeting. I am very excited to share some information about the state boards and commissions, as well as our appointments process. But as Leah mentioned, my name is Jack Congello. I am the Director of Boards and Commissions here at the Governor's Office. I've been working here since September of 2020 and have had the great honor and privilege of working with folks across Minnesota from a wide variety of communities. But today I just really want to share with you more information about boards and commissions. So the first thing I want to note is that historically, we have some data here that talks about the board successes. So during the Walz first administration, we've had quite a few appointments made, including over 1,800 appointments. These appointments go to a large variety of boards and commissions, but overall, we were seeing increases in trends for diverse appointees. Now, when we discuss diverse appointees, this could mean increases in race demographics, gender demographics, and disability demographics. So overall, we do want to make sure that the boards and commissions reflect Minnesota as a whole. While we have done some great work in the past administration, now that we are in their second administration, we are moving even more and want to diversify even more for the boards and commissions. Now, when it comes to the state boards and commissions, we have hundreds of opportunities. The boards and commissions do play different roles. We have some boards that focus on professional roles. This could mean that boards focus on professional licensure, educational requirements, or more specific career pathways. We also have some boards that focus on different topic areas. So they may provide more of an advisory role and provide advice to the legislature, to the governor and lieutenant governor, and to other leaders throughout our state. When it comes to the topics, our team likes to say that we have topics A to Z, from accountancy to the zoo. with all these different boards, we do have quite a few different seats. Now, generally, the boards themselves will have the requirements for the seats, but we do have some pretty common trends. The most common trends here include professional seats, public member seats, geographic, and demographic seats. So I'll take each one in turn. First, with the professional seats, these are most likely found on our professional licensure boards. When you come to professional seats, these are seats that require specific professional requirements. For example, it may require a certain number of years within a specific profession. It may require a type of licensure. Other examples could be that you need to have specific connections to the profession being regulated. Now, when it comes to the professional boards, we do have those professional seats, but we also want to make sure that the public's voice is represented at the table. So there are seats there called public member seats. For public member seats, these are very specific requirement seats that they generally require folks to be financially, maritally, and professionally removed from the profession that's being regulated. So for example, if you're looking at the Board of Medical Practice, a public member seat would require that somebody generally be not married to a doctor, does not have any financial interest in the practice of medicine, and they themselves have not been a doctor. But again, these seats are focused on trying to make sure that we have the public's interest and the public's voice represented on these professional licensure boards. Now, some of our other boards will also include geographic seats. These seats often require different balances between Metro and Greater Minnesota balances. There may be requirements for congressional districts, but they are usually more focused on where a person is located within the state. And lastly, the fourth most common bucket of seat that we have is called a demographic seat. Now, we do have some boards and commissions that really are making sure that we have the public's voice represented at the table. So for the demographic seats, they may have requirements such as making sure there's a balance of male and female voices. There may be a balance of people with different disability statuses, but they will have more specific areas around a demographic disclosure. Again, as I mentioned, each board is going to have a slightly different requirement. So if there are seats that you're looking at, it may be best to look at the board's requirements itself, which may be more specific. But generally, these are the four types of buckets of seats that we'll see. When it comes to looking for these opportunities and finding the information, the biggest resource I can give you today is the Secretary of State's website. So this website has a lot of information. I would say that the easiest function that there is to use the Boards and Commissions tab. Now, by using this website, you are able to use keywords of interest, and that can be used either by filtering a board or the position. I will note that when you go to the Secretary of State's website, there will be several different tabs of information. And I'm actually happy to share my screen here on a live version. So this is by going to, again, sos.state.mn.us. And when you first get to the loading page, and I apologize, I'm going to back up one slide here. This is the main landing page for the Secretary of State's office. There are many different areas of information, but the one I will direct you to is the fourth from the right, which says Boards and Commissions. There are some drop-down buckets, but the easiest way to access the information is just to simply select this icon at the top, and it will pull up another screen with several options. Now, if you're interested in keeping up to date on what vacancies there are, different postings, there is an option on the lower left-hand side of the screen that says Notice of Open Positions. If you select this option, it will ask for your contact information, and there are these monthly postings that get released from the Secretary of State's office, and this is a great way to sign up for those releases and keep in touch on what opportunities become available. Now for today, I'll direct you to the two tabs on the left, which say open positions and boards and commissions. For the open positions section, if you select where it says find open positions, you'll find a full listing of the seats that are currently available today on the boards and commissions. Now, I will also say this can be very overwhelming when there are several hundred seats available. So the easiest way to boil down the information and find what you're interested in is to use a search function here at the top. You can search positions by title, by name, or by keyword. So for instance, if you are a parent and you want to see what opportunities are available for parents, you are welcome to enter the word parent. And you'll note that automatically the feed is trying to populate with words and positions that it believes will be relevant for your search. But just in case, if you wanted to keep that a broad search, you can just enter the word parent and it'll populate with all the seats that are currently available. Now, if there's an opportunity that you're looking for that's not currently posted, there is a way to deselect the option that says only show open positions. By deselecting this, you can find all the seats that are available for this position. I will note that by selecting this, you'll also find positions that are currently filled, but may become available in the future. Now, to jump back to that main screen where it also offers boards and commissions, there is a similar search function here. So in case you're not sure what positions there are, but maybe you're looking for a board instead, you can use the same search function here. And for an example, if I'm looking for a board that is related to disabilities or disability services, I could just go in and type in disability. And again, the search function will try to populate with ideas that it thinks may be relevant for your search. But you can always select broader, and you'll find the boards that are relevant to your search. When you find a board, feel free to enter into the webpage itself. You'll find a lot of different information for that board. So for example, up on the upper right-hand side of the screen, you'll find relevant contact information. This contact information is for board staff, and they are very knowledgeable on the day-to-day basis, the current application processes, and other information that may be very helpful for your search. Additionally, boards will also have links to the relevant websites included on their web pages and relevant links for their legal authority. Now, this is where you would find more information on the specific requirements for their seats. In case this language is a little too dense and technical, you can still reach out to the board staff that are listed on the top of the page, and they can help you walk through those different requirements. I'll note that on the same page, if you scroll down a little bit, there are details tabs. These tabs will share information about the board, including what kind of per diems or expenses there may be, what the membership makeup is, what the current board duties are, and there may be information about the meetings themselves. So if you want to find more information about what kind of commitment there is, this is a good place to start looking for information. Now, underneath the details tab, there's also a section for members. So if you were earlier trying to search by open position, this is where those open positions for the board are connected. So anytime you see a position that is listed, you're welcome to select the green apply button, and these will lead you to the public applications. I will note that when it comes to public applications, please be aware that the information that you share with the website is public information. One thing I do also want to address is this column that says first application review date. Now, oftentimes our office gets questions around what does this mean and what happens when the date's in the past. To be completely clear, these are not firm expiration dates. They are not firm deadlines. If you see a position posted and there is a green apply button listed next to the position, you are still welcome to select the green apply button and submit an application. The first application review dates are more for our office as we work through the process. So it's not a technical deadline for applications. Overall, there's a lot of information on this website. But again, if there are any questions, please feel free to contact the board contacts that are listed towards the top of the pages. So switching back to the slideshow, again, information for boards are very helpful on the webpage, but if you have questions over the process, please feel free to contact my office directly. In terms of a timeline, I do want to share a little bit today about what to expect when it comes to applying for a board or commission. So to start things off, we have the annual posting dates. These dates generally occur around the first week of November, but it can happen in October and it could happen a little later in November, but generally it is around that first week. During those annual posting dates, the Secretary of State's office will post all the seats that we anticipate becoming vacant at the start of the year. Now, as I mentioned earlier on the Secretary of State's website, there is a first date for application review. And those dates are generally 21 days after a posting is put up on the Secretary of State's website. But as I mentioned, applications are still accepted. You are still welcome to apply, and applications are accepted on a rolling basis until seats are filled. At the top of every year, we do have many seats that expire just due to their natural terms. However, I will note that many incumbents may continue to serve until a successor is appointed. This is our annual turnover date, and a big time when our appointments team will be in the process and working through the appointments process. Now, many of our boards have deadlines, and the seats must be filled by the end of June of each year. So between January and June, our teams will be working to fill as many seats as possible. This could happen across a wide variety of boards. So in case there's a board that you are specifically interested in and want to know what stage of the process the team is working on, please feel free to contact either the board staff or the governor's office staff. At the end of the day, one thing I really want to emphasize is that while I can be here every day, I am passionate about sharing information about boards and commissions. I am happy to share the information that we have available, but I really need you. I need your help. We have so many opportunities and so many ways to benefit the state, but you are the only one who can bring your skills, your knowledge, and your perspective to the table. If you're interested in sharing your passions and interests, we have many seats available, and I would love to see your applications come through. But just in case, if there is maybe some other complications or other factors that you are balancing, you don't have to feel pressured to sit into the seats right off the bat. If you yourself are not interested in serving on a board, there are still ways of staying involved with our appointments process. One of the biggest ways is to share the news. Share these opportunities with your friends, your family, other community leaders. Feel free to pass along this information and send them information about the board's commissions. You are also welcome to connect them with our office. Additionally, as part of our standard boards process, we have a process where we consider feedback and recommendations from the public. So if you are ever interested in a board, but want to support a friend, a colleague, or a community leader, please feel free to contact our office and send us those feedback pieces and recommendations. Those recommendations really help the state and really help us find the strongest leaders and the strongest people for these positions. So I know today has a lot of information. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you may have during the Q&A session. But please feel free to use my contact here, the gov.appointments email, and I'm happy to connect a little later on. But for now, I will turn it over to Leah.
Jack, thank you so much. That was really informative, and it was great to be able to see the website and how to navigate all the plethora of information that's available there. So thank you very much for sharing that with us today. Next, we have Michele and Becky. So I invite you both here and say welcome very much.
I am Michele Isham, and I serve as vice chair on the Commission for Deafblind, and Hard of Hearing. I was a former chair, and I have been on the commission, I think, for about 12 years now, somewhere around there, 12, 14 years. And I do have to say it has been the best experience that I have journeyed on, I guess. I've met so many people over the years, met so many legislatures, and I even actually understand the process of the government a little bit better. So not totally, but it's getting there. We have currently on our board, we have 15, we're supposed to have 15 board members, and 50% are deafblind, hard of hearing, or 51%, and the rest can be hearing. And I should say too, I am a hard of hearing person as well. I think it's probably taken me 12 years to really understand what my role is. And I've noticed over the years that when people do start on the board, it's overwhelming and not quite sure what their role is on the board. And actually with our commission, one thing that we have done now is we assign a mentor to a new board person so that they can begin to feel a little bit more comfortable with the process and all of that. And I do want to make another comment regarding the application process. I get a lot of feedback. We get a lot of feedback about the application process can be difficult for our deafblind, and hard of hearing consumers out there. And so one of our committees is actually going to be trying to address that issue and how we can make it easier for people with disabilities to go through that application process, because honestly, it is a little confusing. But again, once you ask questions, have a mentor that you can contact, that makes that process a lot easier. And so what I want to do is I want to turn it over to Becky so that she can introduce herself. Otherwise, I'll talk the whole time.
Hi, I'm Becky Thomas, and I am here for the Commission of the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. And I'll just share a little personal experience that I've had thus far. I've been involved for 6 or 7 years up until now. I was already in service with the community, the board, and the state board, and I was super nervous when I first joined. It was kind of awkward trying to navigate my way through and figure out what I'm supposed to do, but it was really empowering. The board members allowed me to empower myself, because in the beginning I didn't see myself, but I had a mentor who was assigned with me, like Michele said, and I had the committees that I joined, and I learned so much, and I feel like I found my voice within the committees, and I was able to take in other people's perspectives and really make an impact on the board. So it's been a really empowering situation thus far. I have applied for other state and board commissions. I haven't heard anything back yet. I'm not sure. I don't know if it's because they see the label of deaf and automatically are intimidated by the fact that someone is deaf or hard of hearing. I want people to be more open-minded and more accepting of disabilities. I mean, just potential to learn from each other is limitless. And I know a lot of people who are hearing have joined the board and commission, and it's just been a really neat experience. Both parties have benefited. Yeah.
Very good, Becky. Thank you, and Michele, for sharing your experience with the group. We appreciate that. So this might be a good time now to open for questions from our participants here today. They've seen the website and heard a little bit about the process of joining from Jack. And they've had a little bit of a taster from Michele and Becky about their process starting a board. I think it's amazing you both have been with the board for such a long time. That does say that there's something good about that process that's keeping you there and fulfilling work. And as Becky was saying, learning perspectives, and Michele was saying about learning the ways of government. So clearly, if you've both been with the board that long, you're getting something beneficial from that. So I will open up the floor for our participants to raise their hand or type in chat if you have a question for any of our panelists here, and including Jack. And I see Marissa has their hand up.
Do you have to be 18 or older to be on a part of a council? Like what are the ages? Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your question. For the question around what ages you have to be for a council, there really isn't a strict age requirement for a majority of our boards and commissions. Now, I would say that for some boards, it would be worth taking a look at seat requirements, as there may be specifics for a board of interest, but that would vary by board. Generally speaking, however, we do have youth and other members who are maybe younger who have joined boards and commissions. So it's not outside the realm of possibility. But I would say if there is a particular board that you're interested in, it would be worth looking through the statutory requirements for those specific seats.
Thank you. And
This is Michele.
Michele, yes.
Can I add something to that? I think that's a great question, because I know, speaking for the commission, myself haven't been on the board for a long time. I'm getting up there in age, although I tell everyone that I'm 25 yet. But having said that, though, I mean, I would love to see younger, like 18, 20-year-olds to actually be on that board, to have that perspective of a younger person. Because right now it feels like our board is kind of gravitating toward middle age in that area. And so we kind of lose that perspective of the younger population. So I think that's a great question and a great idea to try to get younger people on the commissions. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Excellent, Michele. Thank you very much for that. Marianne has their hand up.
Hi, everybody. I'm real. Thank you for having this meeting. How are we supportive of people how are we supportive of volunteers? Because I am going to try and find a way to get volunteers to have human rights.
Thank you, Marianne, for that question. So
thank you.
Paraphrasing the question is, what kind of human rights protections do people who serve on the boards and commissions have, if any of you are aware of that?
Well, I'm happy
This is
to
Becky here. Becky here, I can answer that. As a deaf person and as a late deaf person, I grew up hard of hearing. I was able to speak, but I couldn't hear, so I had to depend on interpreters. And there was a lot of barriers that I experienced in relation to communication access. And sometimes I would ask for an interpreter and people would say, well, that's expensive. And I understand that. But I was afraid about that language barrier. I didn't know, or people didn't know how to approach me. There's just so many, and now there's so many cool technology pieces that are available today, whether it be phones can have captioning, people can speak directly to the phone. And we have these other options here. We have Google Meets. Google Meets is a great opportunity for people again, and the captions aren't perfect, but they follow most of what people say. And I wish that more people were open to try and meet us halfway and communicate with us. But oftentimes there's kind of this defense put up, this wall that's put up on how do I communicate with this person? And I don't want to offend them. And I said, you know, you're not going to offend us. Just ask how you can communicate with us better. So that's been one barrier that I've experienced as a deaf and hard of hearing individual.
Becky, thank you so much for sharing that. That's good to hear from personal experience how you were able to overcome some of that. And Jack, you were going to say something as well?
Yeah, I'm happy to note that, especially in my experience of working with a variety of boards and commissions, the executive directors, the board staff, the leadership of boards have truly been tremendous. They are highly supportive. Actually having some folks here to share their experiences today is incredibly valuable. So I would say that, especially as you are working through some of these questions, and especially as you engage more with the boards, the staff and the executive directors have been immense resources and great support systems as well. There are other technologies, as Becky mentioned. And I know there are a lot of boards and commissions that are working on implementing these technologies and getting more support from the state. So I know we still have a lot of way to go to make sure that it is an inclusive environment, but there are steps being taken and immense work done by the boards themselves.
Thank you for that. And Michele, I see you have your hand up. I just want to go back on something Jack mentioned earlier. You did say that your office is open to hearing feedback from people. How would somebody contact your office to give that feedback? Is there a specific website they go to or email address they could use?
Yes, so I'm happy to also include this in any follow-up communication as well. But we do have a general phone line that we can make sure that any feedback verbally is communicated to the proper teams. Additionally, I have a direct email address that I'm happy to share as well. That gov.appointments email address is carefully monitored and watched for feedback. And even if it's something that maybe outside of the realm of boards and commissions, we do work very closely with our policy teams, our public engagement teams, and our communications teams. So we're happy to pass that along to them as well.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Michele?
Yeah, this is Michele here, and I just wanted to add that a lot of it has to do with education. And I know our commission is, that's one of their goals is to educate as many people as we can. So to educate other boards, to educate the governor's office. I know that the commission does work with the governor's office a lot. And so that has been really, really helpful so that we can eliminate some of those barriers. So it's just a matter of even these commissions talking to each other to, you know, how can we provide this kind of access? How can we meet this person's needs? So it really has to do with education, I think, a lot. So Marianne, I think if you can go out there and educate people, I think that would be really helpful. I know I would love to maybe have you come to one of our commission meetings and you can educate about disabilities. So, so that's just a thought I had.
Thank you so much. So some of the other questions that we got from members ahead of time were wanting to know, and this is for any of you, but what about board members being paid for their service?
Sorry, just finding that unmute button. So in terms of payment for service, a majority of these boards and commission seats are volunteer positions. I will note that a large number of them have per diems available. I believe the most common per diem amount is $55, but there are some boards that may have more, they may have different expenses. And I would say that the best way to figure out exactly what options are available is to look at the Secretary of State's website. The boards have been really good about posting that per diem information up on the website. But if there are questions about reimbursements or other financial questions, board staff and the governor's appointment staff are happy to connect with you in that as well.
Thank you. And just for people who may not be familiar with the terminology, a per diem is a payment for services for things that to cover things such as parking or meals. And so it's like an allowance, right, for the time that you're on that board. Thank you for that. Some other questions that were coming in were for Michele and Becky, interested to know, what are you currently working on your board? What does that work look like, and what kinds of things are you asked to give input on?
Yeah, Michele, do you want to take it?
I'll start with that. That's a really good question, and that's kind of a complicated question. And I will just say that as a board, we just started doing the governance way of doing things, which I don't want to get into, what exactly that means, but it's a very good way to keep the board accountable for their work. And so we have a set of policies that tells us what we need to do. And one of our jobs is to find out from the community, and by community, I mean deaf, blind, and hard of hearing, to find out what is needed around the state for our community. And so part of our job is to take that information in, and we do have an executive director who I see is on. And so I'm sure she's taking notes about what I'm saying. But anyways, so she takes that information, and based on that information, she developed goals and a work plan based on the information that is gathered from the community. So that's how that work is started. And our commission has staff members as well to help to work on those goals that the board has established. So I hope that makes sense. And Becky, if you want to add anything more to that.
Michele, no, everything you said is 100% accurate. We're operating under the governance of several different things. Everything we have to bring to the board, and the staff has to inspect and develop whatever to do next. That's just really important when it comes to like bills and serving our people of the deaf, blind, and hard of hearing communities. And the board members not only have to adhere to the governance, but they also have the staff overseeing everything, the directors overseeing everything, and making notes and then bringing it back. So it really is a complex process.
That's probably a good segue to another question, which is, do you need to know, for instance, Becky mentioned bills. Do you need to know legal language? Do you have to read a lot and take in information to be able to make decisions? And how do you get help with that?
I can start with that one, Becky. I do have to say, one of these staff people on the commission, that is her job, to take a look at the legal issues, what issues are, I'm sure I'm not going to say this correctly, but she looks at our legislative agenda, I guess. That would be the best way to say it. And, how does that impact deafblind, and hard of hearing. So she is constantly on the move, talking to legislators, talking to the community, talking to a lot of people to find out what those bills. So oftentimes we go to her if we have questions about bills in that language, because it is complicated, and especially for our group, because a lot of our members in our group use American Sign Language, so that is their first language. And so we're fortunate that we have the staff people available that can help us with that. And so Becky, I'll let you add on anything with that.
Yes, and I agree with Michele 100%. I would like to add some of our policies can be super complex in language, and for deaf or hard of hearing individuals or who do not read English well, it can be even that more complex. So we like to break it down into simple language, simple English that they could potentially understand, whether it is signing the questions to them, you have a deaf on deaf individual working in kind of a situation, and it's just really nice to have that language accessibility, to have a person to break down the language to make it more clear.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Other people are asking, how often do these groups meet?
I'll jump in. This is Michele. Our group meets as a full board. We meet 4 times. Is that correct, Becky? 4 times a year.
Yes.
However, we have committees, and so some of those committees decide how often they need to meet. So as I said, one of our committees is kind of collects that information from the community. So we don't meet quite as often, but we have a recruitment committee, training, and how can we recruit people from the community? How can we make it more appealing to work with the governor's office to make it a little bit easier for the application process? We also have what we call a governance committee that kind of monitors our policy, kind of monitors what the board is doing, what their work is. And then we also have our executive committee, and that usually is the chairperson, the vice chair, and the executive director, and usually one other person. And we just talk about the current needs, we talk about the agenda. And I completely forgot what the question was. I'm going on.
You're answering it. How often do they meet?
So I'll stop while I'm ahead.
No, that's really helpful. That's really helpful. Thank you. Becky, did you have anything to add to that?
No, nothing else to say to that. I mean, she really covered everything. So thank you, Michele.
And do you meet virtually or in person, or do you have hybrid options for people?
This is Michele here. We, since COVID, we have met virtually. However, we're slowly trying to get back into meeting in person. We've had I believe one in-person meeting so far. And I know our executive director is looking at trying to figure out some options for people that are in greater Minnesota that can't drive, and also for deafblind board members as well, that transportation can be kind of tricky. So we do try to look at all those options. And I know our executive director has done a fantastic job at looking at different options that are available. But our next meeting is in person, and I'm very excited for that. So we haven't met each other been together for a while, but it's both. And especially during the winter, when we may have a snowstorm, it's nice to have that option of meeting on Zoom.
We need that in Minnesota, sometimes deep into April as well, as we've just realized. There's another question, Michele and Becky, about which you just touched on. Um, when you, what kinds of accommodations are available to board members? What are the typical accommodations that you've had experience with for board members?
This is Michele here, and I have to say the commission does a fantastic job with making sure that accommodations are whatever accommodations people need. So for our group, we typically will have a cart or captioning. We have obviously interpreters. And for our deafblind board members, we also have interpreters for them as well, whether it's protactile or tactile signing. If we need things enlarged, like a policy book, or if someone may be doing a presentation, then there's some accommodations that may need to happen because of those presentations. So we really, I think this is a fantastic group to make sure that accommodations are happening for all of our members, not only for our members, but the public as well, who would like to listen in on our meetings, or because we do have a time for public comment. So we want to make sure that even our constituents have access as well.
Excellent. Thank you both very much. So much good information. I'm surprised at the time that it's actually time for us to sign off. And I see Marianne has their hand raised as well, and would just encourage you to type your question in chat, or use those other means to contact people so we can keep to time today. I'm sorry we didn't get back to you, Marianne. And we do have another final slide for people, but I want to genuinely thank all of you, Jack, Becky, Michele, our interpreters, for a wonderful presentation, sharing with us your experience on boards and commissions. It really makes a difference to hear from a personal perspective.